Now, we're really starting to see the breakdown of the global economy. And you can change statistical numbers any way you want. You can make it look fantastic. But the bottom line is when the people are actually feeling it, when you see retail businesses going out of business, when you see corporations going out of business, this tells you the entire story. I mean, look, prior to 2008, they were telling us with all their statistical information and all their research and the Fed looking ahead that there was nothing wrong. Everything was absolutely fantastic. Everything was contained. There was nothing to worry about. Don't worry. Keep purchasing homes. Prices of real estate does not drop. It doesn't. So just believe us. And they were completely wrong. What we're seeing right now is a complete and utter breakdown of the real system. I'm not talking about the illusionary numbers of GDP, the statistical information of unemployment. You can change the numbers. You can leave certain things off. You can remove certain information. You can make it look any way you want. The bottom line is when you really look at what's going on, you can see what's really happening. I mean, let's look out in the UK right now. The UK, there's a huge housing real estate downturn right now. The same thing that we're seeing in Australia, in Canada, the US. Of course, everyone's making it seem like everything's fantastic. But when you look at this, you can see that there are major, major problems. Now, out in the UK, we have this company called Countrywide. This is UK's largest real estate service group with over 10,000 employees in 900 locations. And they're seeing their shares drop by something like 60%. What's the problem? The problem is they're having problems selling homes. People aren't coming to purchase. Traffic is drying up. And it's getting worse as time goes on. And Countrywide said its problem had been exacerbated by a flagging housing market, particularly in London. The prime central London housing market continues to experience low levels of activity owing to political and economic uncertainty. Now, of course, they're using the Brexit to explain away what is happening here, but we see this happening in Canada. We see it happening in Australia. We're seeing it happen in the US. This has nothing to do with Brexit. What is happening here is that people, the everyday person who has a job, cannot go out and afford anything anymore. They can't take on a new loan. It's completely impossible. And it is spreading. We're seeing it in Australia. We're seeing it in Canada. We're seeing it throughout Europe, the UK, the United States. It's all starting to fall apart. Now, here in the United States, we had the GDP numbers come out. And there's a reason why we're seeing all of this. This is to control the narrative, to control what is coming up. And all of this is being prepared for the economic transition. Remember, who put this system into place? It was the central bank system who started manipulating the data, the deep state, the central bank. This is just a continuation of what they've been doing. Why? Why all of a sudden have they taken this to the extreme? Do you really think GDP miraculously went up to 4% overnight? No, it's impossible. They manipulated the data on purpose. Now, they changed the calculation of real GDP from using $2009 to $2012, which boosted growth strictly from a lower rate of inflation. Now, remember, the Fed is out there and the mainstream media is out there, the corporate media. They're trying to convince everyone that inflation is 1%, 1.2%, 1.5%. We want to get it up to 2%. But if you go out and you ask the average household about real inflation and you talk about healthcare costs, insurance, food, energy, do you really think they're going to say, yeah, it's about 1%? No, they are likely to give you an earful that the cost of living is substantially higher than 1.2%. But if you look at what the Fed has been doing, they've been telling you that we don't see inflation. And we know that this is completely fake, phony, and false. Now, this revision, which was almost entirely due to the change in the inflation rate on a nominal basis, there was virtually no real change at all. In other words, stronger economic growth came from a mathematical adjustment rather than the increases in actual economic activity. The change to a lower inflation rate also boosted disposable incomes and personal consumption expenditures, which also boosted the savings rate. But that change, that calculation that they changed, it doesn't change in economic reality. Yes, on paper it looks great, but in reality, that's something completely different. Despite the adjusted bump in savings, consumer activity continues to remain weak, given that roughly 70% of the economic calculation comes from personal consumption. So if we watch consumer activity, which is a good leading indicator of where the economy is headed next, we can see that consumers are not very active. Why do you think retail is plummeting? Why do you think people are not purchasing homes? Why do you think automobile sales are dropping? Because the plan was to get everyone in, subprime, subprime. Anyone that has a heartbeat, they're running out of people. That's the problem. So changing the math doesn't change reality. And if you look on the street and you talk to the everyday person, you can see that reality does not match the statistical information that they changed. But this is all being done on purpose, because what they're doing is they're pushing the economy to the edge to control the narrative, because they're going to go back and say, hey, wait a minute, who's been doing this? Who's in charge of this? Where are we getting these numbers? You've been telling me all along that the economy is doing fantastically. Were these the same calculations that Obama was using? I mean, the Fed doesn't know that these are fake numbers? What's going on here? That's what's going to happen. Now, remember, under Obama and many other presidents, they were putting a lot of people on food stamps, getting a lot of people onto entitlement programs, and they were making everyone dependent on the government. And once you have everyone dependent on the government, you can control people. Now, remember, what they wanted to do is they wanted to place everyone on the government entitlement programs. Also give them universal basic income. Just continually create currency. Even if the economy collapses, they would put the printing presses into double overdrive, and people will still get their entitlements. Now, when the economy collapses, we're not doing that. And if you had people on all these entitlement programs like food stamps and things like that, and people weren't receiving it, you might have riots. You might have people very upset. So before the transition occurs, you need to get everyone off of the government assistance programs. Yes, there's still going to be people on there, but you don't want to have the majority of the American people on it, because they'll rise up and they'll be very pissed when their payments stop. So right now, the Trump administration, the Patriots, they're removing people from the food stamps. About 3.5 million people have been lifted off food stamps right now. So when the system falls apart, they don't have to look at the government and say, hey, how come we're not getting our money? We're getting very angry. I can't eat. Right now, people are going to figure out a way to get their food, maybe get a part-time job or some other way. And many people, they were receiving this money where they really didn't need it, and they were just on it. And all of this is being done for a particular reason. Now, again, I'm not saying that everyone was on there that didn't need it. There's going to be certain people that really do need it. But to have 3.5 million people on there, it wasn't going to work as we go through this transition, because guess what? The government cannot pay for all this. This is not what the founding fathers really wanted. And the only way to get off of this, and I know it's going to be difficult for many people, and it's going to be difficult as we go through this transition. Nobody said this was going to be easy. Nobody said there was going to be a light switch which you just flipped up and everything was going to be back to normal. If you want a system that is a people-driven system where you're creating currency without interest attached, you need to separate it from the system we're in now. And the only way to do that is to collapse the system we're in now and move to something completely different. And yes, there's going to be pain. Of course there is. But on the other side, there's light. And we just have to get there, because the central bankers, the deep state, they've done so much damage to the country. The only way out of this is to get rid of their system, because we're under the influence of their system. and we need a system that is completely different than what we're in. And once we're in a new system where we're not letting the government borrow the currency and have to pay it back with interest, which really translates to the people paying it back, we're going to see something a lot better. We're going to see something where the currency doesn't devalue. We're going to see something much more stable, where a lot more people can make it. But to get there, we're going to have to go through some pain. And the pain has already started. Many people are already feeling it. But from this point on, it's going to get worse as we move forward. So get prepared,